I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling. Shouldn't be trusting me, I could be making it all up, you know. Out of control, you don't know me. I'm a danger to myself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. Okay, today we are getting back to Heche, and this will be part 4. So if you haven't seen any of my previous videos on this, you may want to go back and watch it. I have a playlist. I will be putting it up right here so that you can get caught up before you start on this video, because I cover a lot. In order to not have an hour-long video, I usually do any of my deep dives in parts, just because it keeps your attention and you're not getting bored and end up missing something major because you're just trying to get through my video. Because I know there are parts that can be a little bit, they may drag on, so I get that. I just want to say thank you to my current subscribers. Thank you to all my new subscribers. I am very, very happy to have you here joining part of our family, which is what I'm trying to create here. I am trying to create a community of people who like to critical think when we are going over crime cases or conspiracy cases. I'm not about all this like crazy speculation theories and everything, although there are times when we do have nothing left to do but speculate. When we are missing big pieces of a puzzle, we do have to kind of speculate here and there. But to take it on to a whole nother level where we are just creating mass hysteria, in my opinion, is a whole nother thing that I will not do here on this channel. So if you're thinking I'm gonna start going nuts and start throwing all sorts of craziness out, you might as well click off now. I'm gonna go into the facts, and I will only speculate where necessary. And of course I will say, obviously this is speculation, or this is my opinion. Anyone who is new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope that you find something that you learn about it. I hope you find something educational about it. And I hope that you stick around and you subscribe because you enjoy the content that I put out. That being said, let's get into part 4 of Heche, Tragedy or Conspiracy. We are going to be getting into some theories. We're going to start talking about Anne's injuries in this video. And one thing I want to point out is that one of my beliefs when covering a crime is the importance of what we don't have. It is something that I look at. I actually have a chart that I made on Canva, and I follow it every time for every case, looking at things that we have, what we don't have, key players, connection, things like that. Most people, when they're questioning whether or not a crime has been committed, the first thing that comes to mind is evidence, right? What do we have to either indicate foul play or not? My belief is sometimes a lack of evidence can indicate foul play. And we can use Kylie Rodney as an example. One of the main things that we don't have, although at this point I think the police do have it, just for what we know so far, we don't have her phone. Why wouldn't we have her phone? We've seen all sorts of things in the video of her vehicle, but no mention of her phone. And this is something that would tell us a lot, and something that all people have spoken out, and they have said that she had in her possession that night because she texted them during the party. So where is her phone? And I think that that is questionable in any investigation. If someone is found dead and you cannot find their phone anywhere around them, that's a red flag. I don't care who you are. Everyone has a phone. So what I'm looking for, even before evidence, even before what we do have, I'm looking for things that we don't have that we should have. In the case of Heche, we have some evidence. We have her car, we have her body, we have video footage, we have a few witnesses, but what we don't have is a public autopsy report, a toxicology report, a death certificate, a burial certificate, an investigation report of the car or the scene, and we don't have a will. Now, we'll be getting into the will and what's going on with her son, Homer, and we touched on that a little bit in the last video, but I'm going to go into much greater detail on that because that is just starting to blow up too. I'm going to go into that after I go through what I already had up until we knew about this. This came out after I had already started my videos. And now we know that James Tupper's disputing Homer's petition. So it gets deeper, and I found some other information out too. Just like any death, you find out more things the more weeks that go by, and then eventually everyone just kind of shuts up about all of it and forgets about it because something else has gone on, right? But as of now, there's a lot of information that's starting to come to light, and we will go over all of it. I need to get through what I already had first because it's all important. So notice a pattern here of what we don't have that may indicate foul play. No documentation, no proof. It's very interesting because I did the Bob Saget. I did videos on Bob Saget. I dug very deeply into that. There was an autopsy report. There was a toxicology report. There were documents that we should have that we don't have for Anne Heche. She's also been cremated, and her ashes are said to have been placed where, quote, she would be happy, unquote, and Homer has said that. The vehicle, at this point, I assume it's been scrapped. The house and any other property is protected by the court due to having no will, but we'll get into that because James Tupper says he has emails saying that Anne wanted to name him on the estate, so we really don't have much left to go on as far as physical evidence because they didn't do any investigation. They started and then they stopped just as quickly as they started. It was like they started the investigation that day, that morning on a Friday. Anne slips into this coma, is pronounced brain dead, and the day she's pronounced brain dead is the same exact day that they started their investigation. So the next day, they cancel their investigation. It's interesting how quickly that happened, within a 24-hour period. Injuries, right? And cause of death. The first crash didn't seem to do any real noticeable damage to the vehicle. So the first crash being the one where she hit the garage in the apartment complex. Assuming that she had no injuries when she went into the house. So what I'm saying is I don't think she had any injuries from the first crash. So all the injuries that she had would have to be assumed to have come from the second crash, the major crash, the crash that essentially killed her. So she had no injuries when she went into the house. So I'm going to go off that crash as being the cause of all of her injuries. We have David Manpearl's eyewitness account that Anne was talking and that she was pinned in the vehicle. She was trapped. David Manpearl said that the fire started about 1 minute after he spoke with Anne. And he also said he never saw her face. He said that the fire began under the car and it rose upwards. It took fire department 65 minutes to put the fire out and remove Anne from the vehicle, though they reportedly arrived within 10 minutes of the 911 call. If the fire was blazing for about 55 minutes, if my calculations are correct, then no doubt I can understand why David Manpearl thought she was going to be burned to death. And it certainly appeared at first that she was. Fire department wheeled her out on that gurney, covered up in a, quote, burn blanket, unquote, which I don't even think it looks like a burn blanket. Honestly, it just looks like a regular hospital sheet to me. But many had jumped to conclusions without even looking closely at this. People said that she had popped out of a body bag. And I admit, at first glance, that's kind of what it appeared to be. But let me show you these close-up screenshots I took so I can show you that she was never in a body bag. You can see here her legs and her feet, as well as her hand and part of her arm, are not covered. They are sticking out of the sheet or the blanket. Now here's the video. You can see her hand rise up first, and then out she pops from underneath this blanket, sheet, cover, whatever. This is where it got interesting for a few brief seconds. It's also where it remains just as perplexing. She appeared to be a few things in these quick seconds that we can see her. She seems to be stable enough to sit up. She seemed a bit upset. She did not appear to be burned. Even all of her hair was still there. Witnesses said that she was screaming the whole time. We then can see the firefighter put his hands on her arms and kind of push her back to have her lie back down. And she's not having it from the looks of things. I really want to know what happened in that ambulance for that 26-mile ride to Grossman Burn Center. So what happens then? She gets to the hospital. She's intubated immediately to protect her airway, but she is reported to be in stable condition. And for people to respect her privacy, That's what was told to us. She is in stable condition and respect her privacy while she recovers. It was also said that she was going to be facing a slew of charges, but that she would likely make a full recovery. So what the hell happened then? She succumbed to her injuries. Her cause of death was listed as smoke inhalation and thermal injuries, but that was in one article. In another article, it listed her cause of death as sternal fracture due to blunt trauma and an anoxic brain injury that caused her to slip into a coma and ultimately caused brain death. Interestingly, we never hear from the facility or doctors that actually treated Anne Heche, and we never do. When it comes to celebrities in these mysterious cases, we don't ever actually hear from the facility or the doctors that actually treated them. Other facilities and other doctors will weigh in on the findings, but we never hear from the actual treating physician, as was the case again with Bob Saget. We had all these other doctors and specialists calling up, weighing in on what they felt, whether they agreed with the findings or didn't, and yet we didn't hear anything from the treating physician or the coroner or anyone who actually physically was with the body or victim, I guess. So this doctor spoke out to try and help explain to us why Anne was conscious at the scene but ended up succumbing to smoke inhalation.
This video showing the woman on a stretcher flailing and, according to neighbors, screaming at the time.
She may have been conscious at the time, but most likely with the level of smoke that she inhaled, consciousness would have decreased over time. She sustained an inhalation injury, which means there was damage to her airway. She could not breathe on her own. And she also sustained flame burns, third-degree burns, which require surgery. Whenever you're in an enclosed space, like a car or an apartment or a house, that allows smoke and chemicals to build up, which damages the lungs and prevents you from breathing on your own. So the only way to survive is to have mechanical ventilation, artificial breathing for you on a machine. That means that she could not breathe on her own, that she sustained smoke inhalation. She inhaled a lot of smoke, which damaged her airway. She had to be placed on mechanical ventilations or she would have died at the scene.
Now, this does not make sense to me at all, because what his last sentence was. First of all, it appears he's reading off a script. He even looks down as if he's reading off of a script. It doesn't feel like he's speaking from a medical standpoint. And what he's talking about is something that if he, he's a doctor, so he would know how to explain this to someone without reading it. I mean, I would hope, right? Secondly, he says, she would have required mechanical ventilation or she would have died at the scene. At the scene. I don't at the scene, she was conscious, coherent, screaming, trying to get away. At the scene, she was not given mechanical ventilation. So what is this? He says she would have required mechanical ventilation or she would have died at the scene. That makes no sense. She was removed from the scene, loaded into an ambulance, driven 26 miles to the burn hospital, and then she was placed on mechanical ventilation. The doctor also says in a different part of the interview that she was probably placed in a medically induced coma. Now, I don't know about you, but slipping into a coma versus a medically induced coma are two completely different things, and circumstances that are surrounding them are different. We were told that she slipped into a coma. This doctor, according to his expertise, says that she was probably placed in a medically induced coma. Either way, we're going off of news reporters. News reporters, they're all trying to do the same thing that YouTubers are doing, right? They're trying to spread information. They're trying to be the one that people go to for information. And sometimes they will stretch the truth in order to have people want to view their report versus another person's report. But they will also make mistakes because they're not doing the correct research. So it could be that because it was said that she had slipped into a coma, all the other newscasters put slipped into a coma and nobody questioned it. They're just trying to get the news out. And the quicker the better. So they don't really have time to fact check everything, right? So It could just be that they made a mistake. It happens a lot. I found some news reports about this case that made absolutely no sense. There were tons of typos, and they were calling Anne Heche a he, and so you really have to do your own research, because human beings miss things, and sometimes a certain person or news outlet has an agenda or has their own narrative of what they believe, and that's how they're going to explain the story. So gonna have to be careful with certain things. Now, what they did once they were in the ambulance, we will never know. No one's ever going to tell us that, and we weren't there. Was she intubated in the ambulance, or was she intubated at the hospital? All that certainly does matter, but again, we don't know. Smoke inhalation could also certainly have caused an anoxic brain injury. I looked into anoxic brain injuries, and an anoxic brain injury is one of two brain injuries that are caused by lack of oxygen to the brain. Hypoxic is the other one, and that's usually caused by a stroke or a pulmonary condition. And it would be important to know how severe her case was, because many mild cases are capable of recovery. Also, what area of the brain was affected matters as well. But again, without autopsy results, we don't know. Getting a bit more scientific, anemic anoxia has to do with blood oxygen levels. Toxic anoxia has to do with chemicals or poisons, and anoxic anoxia is a lack of oxygen in the air or suffocation. And that would be the one that she had due to the smoke inhalation. And that makes sense. If we go off of what we're told, that absolutely makes sense. So the temporal lobe is the most sensitive, and this is also the memory part of the brain. And if this part of the brain is affected, it would only take between 3 and 9 minutes to slip into a coma. But that didn't happen, did it? Because Anne was not in a coma after 55 minutes of being in a burning car. This is a fact. We saw it. This is also why people are having such a hard time understanding how she was able to sit up on the gurney and yell at these people, because she was in that vehicle for 65 minutes. 55 of them, according to David, she was in an inferno, where he actually said she was being burned alive and that he thought there was no chance that she would survive. Typical causes of anoxic brain injury are many different things. One of them is carbon monoxide poisoning and smoke. So the fact that she had an anoxic brain injury is not shocking to me. It just almost feels like it was a miracle that she didn't die in the car. And that's what's causing so much question, right? If everything they're telling us is true, how was she conscious and fine and then slips into a coma and gone? And of course people are going to question that. Does that type of thing happen? It absolutely does, especially with smoke inhalation and burn injuries. A lot of times the adrenaline will take over. You'll be fine, because your body's in fight mode, right? And then you get to the hospital and you start declining because that adrenaline wears off and your injuries start to worsen as opposed to improve, as burns will do. And injury to the brain sometimes does take some time to show up. Whether it is an anoxic brain injury or a traumatic brain injury, sometimes it can take time. Sometimes that's the scary thing about it. You can really crack your head, think that you're okay, and the next day you're gone. Now, it's extremely common that a person's airway may worsen during transport. So if you're in a burning car or building, you can worsen just in that trip to the hospital. The fact that it took, I would think, quite a bit of time to get her to that burn unit as opposed to Cedars-Sinai, which is why I don't understand why they didn't take her to Cedars-Sinai, stabilize her, and then move her to the burn unit. Grossman Burn Center was 26 miles away. She could certainly have declined on the way to that hospital, but that's not what they said. They did not say she declined on the way. They said she was stable when she was admitted to the hospital. But that's where we have to get into what does stable actually mean. It certainly doesn't mean the person is for sure going to live, but it is a good sign that their illness is not getting worse. It's not progressing. So one of the positives about bringing someone who has been in a fire to a special hospital for burn victims or smoke inhalation victims is that they usually have a hyperbaric chamber that they can put a person in immediately to kind of reverse the effects of smoke inhalation. But did they do this? If not, I don't see the point of why they would have taken her all the way to Grossman Burn Center when Cedars-Sinai was right up the road where she could have gotten more immediate care and then be transported to the burn center for the burns. Again, I'm no doctor. This is all my opinion. Do your own research. Form your own opinion. Without knowing what was done once Anne was placed in that ambulance, and without knowing what was done at the hospital, we really can't say anything. Because the types of injuries that were listed as cause of death are 100% possible given the narrative that we receive, even if she were conscious when pulled from the vehicle. But there are certain questions that are unanswered that would help to make this make more sense. And those are the questions that are causing a bit of conspiracy. Next video, we will be getting into conspiracy theories. Until then, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I will talk to you guys very, very shortly. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Oh, you don't know me. I am fading, unfelt.